Are we doing a Sunday game where we have to start talking when Ollie starts?
See, I didn't even do it. I was like, this isn't Sunday. I'm not going to say anything. And you fucking did it. Perfect. Bravo. Well done.
That was very, very meta of you, Ian. Very good.
Yes.
That one's for the fans.
Bravo.
Planning on being respectful and everything.
You should learn, being a member of these shows, that respect for the DM is apparently not allowed.
Aww.
That's because you're our friend, Ollie.
Doesn't feel like it.
And we don't respect our friends.
Hello! And welcome to Jarviskjir Everhold. Like I was saying in chat, this is going to be a short campaign. Basically, I was getting bored of quarantine and working all the time, so I wanted to set up a weird little show. And this is it. Here it is. Weird little show. We going. How are y'all doing? Good, great. Thank you for telling me your emotions and opinions. We have a bunch of people who've actually never been on a show before, which shouldn't be so surprising, but my show has become so incestual in the last, year, that...
Ollie, you said we wouldn't talk about that.
I'm sorry, my sister. But, we have, Zoe and Shelby, who are new. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying hello.
I mean, Zoe's sort of new.
Zoe's, new-ish.
You can't tell that I'm new, right?
Zoe has been on the Monday game, so if you actually like Zoe a lot, we're actually currently doing a Zoe-focused plot in the Monday game right now. So just remember. Shall we get on with it? Shall we get into the good stuff? So,
Let's.
for aeons, dwarves and elves have not got along. I don't even need to tell you that, because you already knew that. There's so many reasons not for them to get along in Jarviskjir. For one, there's a big old border dispute. Secondly, despite both being long-lived races, they have so many things not in common. Pretty much everything, in every way, they can disagree with. Often just disagreeing with each other because that's the opinion the other race has. So for aeons, pretty much as long as, history of both of the races go back, and both elves and dwarves do respect their history, they've warred. They've fought small skirmishes, big battles, minor disrespects. All the things you would expect out of a Paradox Grand Strategy game has been happening between elves and dwarves for aeons. 200 years ago, they agreed on the Everhold. I'm not going to say signed, it wasn't a treaty, but it was an agreement between both races, elves and dwarves, to make an effort for peace, to try their hardest to create a long-lasting peace that has lasted for 200 years. So that's worthy of celebration. In the dwarven city of Crimson Mountain, which is unofficially considered the capital city of the Dwarven lands, a celebration for the 200th year of Everhold is being set up. In a chamber below the royal quarters, a grand feast and music and everything is being prepared. Excellent and entertaining. Dwarves are ready to be such a gracious group of hosts. But let's not focus on the dwarves right now. Let's zoom in on one of the elves invited to this party who wakes up in a dwarven hotel to the horrible noise of a busy, bustling dwarven city. The Crimson Mountain is huge, and it's also, very dense. Dwarves are actually very clever about the way they organize their city. So while your hotel is above from street level, you can hear the hand carts going along. You can hear the little bell of a tram that goes up and down the middle of the city every day. You can hear people yelling, trying to get their deals, dogs barking, just so much noise. You can't hear birds singing, you can't hear the rustling of the leaves, you can't hear glorious singing. You just hear the city and the dirt. So, Donna, how does that make you feel?
That's Donneruvian.
Donneruvian. That name's gonna take me like 3 times to get on my tongue. You know what I mean? How does awaking, well, from your meditation in a dwarven city, how's that feel? What's up with that?
I think there's like a slight twitch, but the exterior is calm. I don't think the best, I was gonna say nap meditation was had, but is the hotel room visible at all from the outside?
Yes, so actually, maybe because it'd be more comfortable to you, this building is up on the surface. A lot of the dwarven city is kind of like tucked underground and stuff. But you're in the kind of commercial bit that outsiders can visit and not get like claustrophobic. So you have a window, you know, you're on like the 3rd story or something.
Okay, so in that case, the hair is already perfect, and Donneruvian's just gonna like whip a headscarf off and just be like, that's it, I'm set for the day, and just sort of like rise up from maybe a cushion, or if they're feeling like more low-key, the ground, and begin to head out to the day.
Why don't you give us a real quick description of Donneruvian?
Okay, so Donneruvian looks approximately just older than middle-aged. They don't have any defining characteristics in the way of like gender, but what they do have is some perfect victory roll waves in their hair, which is kind of unusual for an elf, but Donneruvian will tell you that they were just born like that.
Cool. You would make your way to where the meeting is. You probably were told yesterday. You have to make your way underground, but you have a little walk through the dwarven streets that they're not dirty. I mean, you are from Aradia. Aradia is a very sparse city with, like, wide streets and canals and things. So just, like, a street where you walk 2 by 2 and there's walls is very claustrophobic to a wood elf. Especially considering dwarves are also very wide themselves. So there's occasionally some shoulder bumps.
Lots of elbows, but it hits
Yeah.
the hip, and it's just like...
Yeah. Stoically traveling through. There's no real... You don't notice any kind of animosity between you, like, as you walk through the streets. People here are just way too concerned with whatever they've got going on. They don't care. There's also other people from other places you see because you were at a hotel. The dwarves don't stay in this hotel, you know. So, many peoples from many places. You make your way towards the top of the city. So, Crimson Mountain, some of you may notice because it has shown up in several shows and games, is not only built like in the shadow of a mountain that is red and kind of built into it, but if you come up from the outside, it's kind of a slope with higher quality buildings as you go up the slope, and there's factories and breweries and all that sort of thing. And you would be pretty close to the top in this hotel. And the top is where the lords' palaces are, which, for dwarves, it's not as gaudy as it might sound. Dwarves definitely put a lot of effort into the stonework. There are brilliant statues where you would expect there to be a garden or a nice public park. There's statues. And just plazas. I caught that one. I told you at some point I'd be describing or we'd have an emotional speech and Donkey Kong would yell. I paused just in time. You actually going underground, though. This is the first time you've had to go, like, underground in the Dwarven city. It's kind of like you would expect these grand palaces before me that kind of, like, built into the very side of the mountain so high up they even get capped with snow in some places, despite the fact that this is the middle of summer. You actually are going through archways that have brilliant Dwarven stonework of them. You assume that it's usually artwork of the gods, just because they're like, oh, this beard is actually straight up smelted into gold and stuff like that. And you go through these hallways which have signage in both Dwarven and Elven towards the Everhold meet. And meet up in a series of 4 or 5 large chambers. They are tall enough that you don't have to bend your head down or anything. They aren't built to Dwarven height. They're very large food halls. Tables have been set up in a very typical Dwarven way. There's no like tablecloths or anything, but they are starting to set up with candles and lanterns, things like that. You see the hand servants going around. And all manner of dwarf and elf, at the moment, just smoozing. You know, people are starting to arrive. The bards are, like, tuning their instruments and things. Considering you don't sleep, you kind of got hit early. Looking around... Yeah, looking around the rooms, and like I said, there's several chambers, but they have, like, large open doorways between them. You would see there's a water fountain in the middle, which looks more for, like, resting than drinking. There's straight up a dwarf who looks like they've just come from a long travel with their feet in the water pool. Yes, exactly. But glancing around, you recognize someone. Ian, why don't you describe Dernikin?
Dernikin is looking a bit old by this point for a dwarf. Bit on the short side, bit on the wide side, even for, as I say, a dwarf. Long, greyish hair, similar beard. They're pretty chunky, pretty like not in like a fat way, but just like very like
more chunky than an average dwarf.
Yeah. They've got that strength about them. Having a poke around at a couple of the food stalls, grumbling vaguely under their breath, or what they think is probably under their breath, and is probably like a bit too loud. They're like insulting the shopkeepers' wares and just like, better in my day, all that sort of thing.
Of course. You recognized him, Donaruvian, across the way. With your elven eyes. It is occasional. By the way, this chamber is lit. Both elves and dwarves have dark vision, so there are some areas of shadow, but like you can all see. You see him across the way.
I think Donaruvian would kind of just have that initial like surprise and have to make the decision to escape or like make eye contact. I think Donaruvian's just gonna sort of just gonna
slide away somewhere else
to the side, but like kind of like still look in your direction.
It's like you're in an archway between two of the rooms, just like at the corner, so you can look through in a very non-chill way, I imagine. Well, this is an excellent time for. Who should we have? I think let's stick with the dwarves and describe Sidian and what they're doing. I imagine just arriving. But feel free to tell me I'm fucking wrong.
Yeah, probably just arriving. Here's a question for you. Would I be arriving from the same pathway or from an alternate route?
I imagine you would be arriving from deeper into the mountain.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, I'm coming up from...
Essentially, yeah. So it would all meet in the same corridors and things, but yeah, you would be coming from inside.
Yeah. So Sidian is kind of a weird-looking dwarf. in that he is about the height of a human. So maybe a little bit tall for a dwarf. Still very stocky like a dwarf, though. Also with very, like, almost like slate gray skin. He is, of course, bald, with a signature dwarven beard. And yeah, he would just kind of be coming up from whatever pathways lead deeper into the mountain, most likely by himself, I assume. Yeah, there's no other homies with me. Okay, cool. So yeah, coming out by himself and just kind of methodically making his way towards wherever it is that we're meant to be going, towards like the feasting hall, like not really stopping to go shopping or look at anything or engage with many of the stalls that are around here, just kind of making his way uptown.
Can you roll me an insight roll, Sidian? And this is a reminder for all the gamers to enable 3D dice in your Roll20 game, if you haven't already, and choose your dice color.
That is a dose.
So, Sidian doesn't notice the, Sidian's dice is a ghost dice, because you're grey.
Is it?
And I've got the culling on.
I can change it.
But Sidian doesn't notice. His skin color isn't so weird it would weird people out, especially when in the gloom. You wouldn't notice the grayness. The tallness and fairly imposing figure you have. Occasionally, not that you notice, some of the women. Dwarves from other places, kind of like, oh, look at him, kind of thing, kind of like, because there's a lot of, there's a little, dwarven women don't tend to have beards, but don't worry, we'll come back around to that in my planned description of various things later. But by the time you get here, it's a lot busier. Pretty much most of the people who are going to be here are here. It's a mixture of basically 50-50 dwarves, elves. There's probably more dwarves, especially if you count the people serving the tables, making sure the lanterns are lit and stuff. The chambers are beautiful. These chambers, the founding chambers, have artwork along the walls that represents... it actually represents a kind of uncouthly... It seems to be a ancient battle between dwarves and ents or something, which maybe isn't so cool to the wood elves in the room. But the end of the rooms, especially where that fountain is, but pretty much every chamber where the north wall would be, is a brilliant display, kind of statue built into the wall, which I can never remember the name of Durdane, the Shield Father, the head of the Dwarven Pantheon. Crimson Mountain is, sometimes to its fault, very holy to Durdane. So by the time you get here, it's busy. There are a smattering of other peoples too. You definitely notice the occasional human, usually in sort of a mercenary bodyguard role. A lot of people do have armor and weapons, because a lot of people are soldiers or generals and things.
Yeah. One thing I did leave out too that I guess is worth noting. I would of course be just traveling with like a typical drab kind of cloak, just in gray. But on the cloak would be, of course, adorned the symbol of Sidian's order, which is like a triangular trillion cut topaz on the back.
Cool. As the goings get a little busier, it gets easier and easier to not notice some of the people in the room. And I think someone who is trying not to be noticed would be Vilnora? Is that right?
That's right.
Why don't you describe yourself and what you got going on?
Alright, so Vilnora is a half-elf. She has olive skin and pale green eyes, and is very typical for what a wood half-elf would be. However, she's got one feature, which is bandages cover basically all of her right eye and most of like her forehead and ear and things. It like entangles with her hair, so she keeps her hair down, and yeah, it looks like it's more like decorative and clean. It's not, doesn't seem to be for like a wound or anything, but yeah, it's covering a lot of her face there. She's got a cloak on for now, but then she's got but as she gets more comfortable, she starts to like just make herself comfortable, maybe take off her cloak or open it up a little bit more, and yeah, there's just long, tight, comfortable fitting clothes with like a sort of dress thing that goes to like her knees, but yeah, traveler's boots and things.
Is
But, yeah,
it good quality clothing or like fairly?
It is
I was
very
trying to think
fine.
it was very good quality clothing, but with like a kind of drab cloak and drab boots.
a
kind of
little
thing.
bit. It's like halfway between travelers and fine, but the cloak is definitely travelers, and then the rest of her outfit is fine.
It does
So, yeah,
seem
brown hair and yeah, it looks very typical for a half elf, and younger. Yeah, just very young.
Am I right? And you were kind of avoiding people.
Yes, in a way, but she's still like trying to pick up what's going on and if she should get food, like because there's stuff going on, and yeah, where it would be all right to do so. Trying to not.
Good point. Food time is now. And I think everyone loves when I describe the feasts. Now, the dwarves are actually organized enough that everyone who has been specifically invited has a name at the table. With a little, and it would actually be a little stone Toblerone, basically, with the name engraved in it. You get to take that home. And everyone who has been invited has been placed, and all of you have been invited, kind of. And curiously enough, you're all going to be sitting actually at an end of a table together. There are like 3 tables in this room, 3 in the other, but the tables are huge. Dwarves like big dining tables, where you need to like ask someone to slide you the meal from the other side. Tables are full of food. They absolutely are. Center is, of course, you know, a roast pig, apple in the mouth and everything. The skin glistening, little bacon strips on it. There is a variety of more dwarven foods, which to elves who have not encountered them, or anyone who has encountered them, you might think that bread has gone stale, because it is slightly purplish grey and hard as like a brick. But no, that's dwarven cuisine. Dwarven bread is very stocky and hardy, with all sorts of good butters and things. And there's a variety of other dishes as well. You know, the roast pig would definitely be the highlight, but there's salads, fruits, vegetables. There are vegetarian options. I don't know if the dwarves would completely understand vegan, although a lot of dwarven food is mushroom-based. But I don't think if you said, is there a vegan option, they wouldn't understand.
I think Donna would basically just sort of surreptitiously pick the things that they can have.
Yeah, absolutely. The head chef, who's bossing around all the mostly dwarven servants and things, are a halfling. A sort of on the older side halfling woman with blonde hair that's kind of faded to silver, and is kind of going, oh, no, you need to have that over there, like literally like kind of in the middle of a room telling people where to put the things, and the gravy goes on that, and this fork should be on this side, and all these things. From your seats, you actually see her go up to the head table. This room has a stage at the back of it, under where that statue is, but in front of the stage is a head table where leaders and such sit. And she goes up to the head table to speak with some of the leadership and seems very friendly to them. In particular, the person given the most sort of respect, who is a round dwarf with copper hair, pale skin, pretty fine clothing, skin's kind of red from both drunkenness, lots of alcohol drinking, and joy. The kind of big nose of all sort of like little marks and things and scrapes and scratches. And you can hear his laughter from across the chamber. He's having a great time talking with an old friend, it seems. But let's not worry about that right now. Let's worry about y'all sitting together. Dernican and Donaruvian, you're sitting opposite each other.
I would first say I kind of imagined that like most of the people in this chamber are reasonably fancy dressed, or at least
yeah.
Like, I think
They're either fancy dressed wearing fine wear, merchant wear which isn't as gaudy, or clean armor, right? Clean armor, like well treated, can pass for fancy clothing wear. But
I think Dern stands out a little bit. Very much sort of travelers wear. Not like the hair and beard are clearly cared for. The clothing a little less so, quite dusty. Clearly not like doesn't have like a fancy set of clothes. And Dern just like as they go to sit down, just before they sit down, just put a big old maul like lean it against the back of the seat, and then sits down. And I don't know if it would be already sat down on the other side.
Yeah, I think they would just sort of get to the table and realize that they're sitting opposite each other.
Yeah.
Just automatically. Dernican.
Yeah, Dern would just like look at you across the table, bro, squint. Bloody hell, Elf! It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Sometime.
Boy, I didn't know you got invited to this as well.
I didn't know that you had been invited, Stone Mulder.
Well, you know, they reached out to me. I don't like these sort of things, but it's been a long time.
You never have.
Nah, not my sort of thing.
The soft skills go over your head, don't they?
What the hell do you mean soft skills?
Exactly.
Anyway.
While this loud conversation, one side's loud, one sound is very graceful. Sidian and Vilnora, you're actually sat opposite each other. Sidian beside Dernican, obviously, and Vilnora beside Donaruvian. It is kind of one side elves, one side dwarves, mostly. But we'll get back to that. So you two would probably find your seats at the they're having a discussion, you know. And these are big dwarven seats. These are not designed for elves. These are designed for a wide dwarf rump. They're heavy too.
Vilnora would like sit down. She's probably like looks really small in her seat, and just do a little wave and like check her stone Toblerone. What name is on my Toblerone?
It would be your mother's name, which I don't know off the top of my head because we made your character
right.
like 2 days ago.
Yeah. And then, like, I'm just looking at it, going, I can take this home, right?
Yeah, Sidian would just sit down, kind of look around. When you offer a wave, just give a head nod and say, greetings. And yes, I think you are allowed to take such, what is the word? Party favors home with you?
Fantastic. And she like pops it just into like her little purse already. And she says, I'm Vilnora.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Vilnora. And I will extend a big meaty paw.
So she goes over and reaches over.
It's definitely a lean over the table job.
And then does a polite shake. Just not wanting to be rude or anything.
I am Sidian. Although you may call me Sid if it suits your needs.
Nah,
Which one do you prefer?
you're not allowed to call.
Flashbacks.
You're not allowed to call him Sid. He doesn't know the chaos, the dark times.
No, Sidian or Sid. I'll see where the mood takes me.
The gods are now telling me Sid is not appropriate, so perhaps Scythian is best.
Oh. We'll go with Sidian to keep them happy.
I do like the idea that you go like, Sid, and there's someone in the back, like, no. Just like far ground. It's me, in the world. Green screened badly in.
Finally found him, boys. Let's get him. Well, just Vilnora. I don't think I've had a nickname. Vilnora.
Excellent.
Mm.
And I will look next door to this conversation that's happening and say, it seems you two already know each other.
I think they would like look away from each other and then just be like, and sit down.
Yeah, I mean, Don sit down. Don will just sort of look for a moment, sort of let out like a yeah, and sort of sit down solidly. So, I'm Dernikin Stone Molder. What's your name over there? Sort of holding out a hand, very like.
Just like...
To me?
Whoever is next to me.
That would be
You're
me,
next
I
to
guess.
Sid, Dion.
Okay.
Yeah, I would give you, of course, the classic dwarven handshake greeting. Lots
This
of
is
wrists.
like.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's totally right.
And there's
Yeah.
far too much strength put into it. I imagine Sidian can handle that, but it's like.
As is customary.
I think you should both make strength checks.
Here's where I now roll on that one.
It's true, yeah.
Do you want just raw strength?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
You got 2.
Okay, so, you know, the youth is clearly stronger, but the old man has some strength in him. And, like, Sidian is quite young for a dwarf, too, right? You're in your 30s, which for a dwarf is, 20, right? So,
Which is something worth mentioning, I guess, that not people would know, but since you bring it up, like, he's in his 30s, but is definitely much more mature than a dwarf typically is in their 30s, right?
Yeah. At the strong handshake, Dern would sort of break into a grin and be like, "Huh, you're not bad, kid."
My name is Sidian Stoneforge. It is a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah. Likewise. And who's this opposite you then? You're getting acquainted.
This is Vilnora, and I'll gesture to the other side of the table.
Hand comes out again.
Oh, she tentatively takes it.
Jerk. Like,
The first death.
It was really nice playing with you guys here.
You take 2 bludgeoning damage.
let's go without sort of like acknowledging the grimace. It's like, yeah. Wait,
No
you from over in the. What's your damn city called again, Elf?
A radio.
No, see, that's actually relevant because a true elf like you would kind of pronounce it differently to everyone else. There's a fun like hidden meme in Jarviskjir in that elves have an AE letter, but a radio is spelt EA because whoever made the maps got it wrong. So absolutely the common way to pronounce it is probably a butchering of the elven language. So I would be totally down for that.
Yeah. So what? So you from there then?
Yes, I'm from Aradia. Yes. Very excited.
Really? I don't know. Never got these things. Never agreed with me. Too many fancy types, you know. Like
at this point, someone like leans over you to pour wine into a goblet.
Oh, what's this? I need some ale. What is this? This is a dwarven celebration.
Come on, ale.
I think Donna would just lean over and say, "You may call me Donna Ruvian. Pleasure."
Pleasure indeed.
From where in our city are you from?
Oh, I'm in more of like the outskirts. Just a big forest with a tiny cottage in the middle.
Wonderful.
You will never find me.
I assure you, my dear, if I had to find you, I would.
Well, yeah, that's one of the few things Don's good for.
I think
You usually track people
they
down?
would just let the name go. There's been literally over 100 years of this.
Would I notice that Villanora's nameplate is different than?
Well, she did take the name slate away.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't catch
no.
That. Okay, then no, that's fine.
Very smooth.
I, as a player, didn't even notice that. So then no.
Yeah, we don't need to play on that detail. It's fine. Just excited to have a
I'm just
thing.
happy to be here.
Just happy to be. That's right.
Drinks are served, food is served. There is water, ale, wine, all those sorts of things. What kind of conversation would there be amongst the four of you? We don't have to roleplay all the small talk, but you know, what would it look like?
I think Donna would flag down a wait staff and just sort of talk to them to the side and then receive like a cleaner fork. or better yet, one singular napkin.
A single hat filled with perfume with a peach within it.
I mean, I feel like Dern goes without saying at this point. Very loud, very boisterous, like ripping into food, like no manners.
Particles.
Yeah, so sort of like taking a big bite, turning to Sidian and like being like, you know, talking to
Dwarven tables are definitely built with that in mind, but even then,
yeah.
you are beyond the cape of such dwarven
It's
engineering.
like Parliament, where it's supposed to be 2 sword lengths apart, but this is food spray.
I think Sidian would generally make polite conversation. Like, definitely, like, initiates a lot of conversation, like, wanting to know more about other people. And not necessarily withholding information about himself either. Like, not in, like, a weird way. Just, like, would be generally polite.
So that's
with dwarvish etiquette.
That's a good thing to do. So those two did the elf. I can't do that. The elves did where they came from. I imagine you would do the same to Dern at some point. Right.
You cut out for a second when you started speaking that. So.
Let's actually roleplay the bit where you asked Dern where he came from, because we did it for the stinky elves.
Yeah. Just at some point, probably between mouthfuls of food.
Literally.
just turn over to Dernican and say, "So, Dernican, where is it that you hail from within our people's lands?"
Right down there. Spend most of my years travelling around now. Some little village on the border originally. That's long gone, I think. Haven't been back there to check, to be honest. Just spend most of my time travelling around now, you know. Odd jobs here and there. Only so much you can do. It's not like they give it. It's not like they care about you once you've done your job in the army for a bit.
I think Donna would say, "You're still wielding? Aren't you past your prime?"
Well, I mean, most of what I do now is traveling around, helping a bit with the stonemason, helping a bit in the forges, you know. But if someone needs me, I can still smack down a monster or two better than your pansy kind can.
How the mighty have fallen.
Tell me that when you can last more than a round with me.
Well, what do you do, Jarviskjir?
Eye contact again.
And that's
Try and
actually, yeah, that's actually perfect. Like, you try to break the conversation, and then, like, probably have to ask again, and it clearly didn't work.
It's like, well, what do you do, Donaruvian?
I'm sorry. Do?
As a job, as a hobby.
Oh, hobbies. Well, since my prime, I've honed my skills in other areas, and I bake.
There's definitely like a grunt of laughter.
Oh, that sounds lovely. What do you bake?
Everything.
Not any
That
of
was
this
really
good.
intense.
Not any of the good stuff. Odin reaches, grabs a handful of like the dwarven bread, and like goes.
Yeah.
I think she's tried some and is like nibbling on the same piece.
Yeah.
It's like, am I actually eating gravel?
It
Did they just do this as a joke?
Does it taste nice?
depends, you know, a lot of, dwarven bread is made from, I believe, plump cap mushrooms, which are a very, like, it's a staple dwarven food. It could be turned into a lot of things. It's turned into the typical ale. It's turned into soups. It is a staple. I've definitely discovered a gazillion times before. If you like the taste of that mushroom, which is kind of neutral, it would taste vaguely mushroomy, then sure. Some
tried a part of it and just been sort of pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, some, like, people who actually care about cookery and stuff can make really good, like, they can just season it and stuff like that and make it into really good stuff. Typical dwarves don't care for such comforts. They like the eating, and they like a variety, but, like, the specific, like, seasoning and stuff doesn't...
I'm feeling called out here.
It's a little bit of me too. I'll eat a lot of trash. I actually really like really dense, heavy bread. There's a kind from a bakery I've been to quite a few times that is basically what dwarven bread is. It's really, it's like take a whole bread loaf and then just squeeze it 3 times smaller. It's great. I love it. Cool. Would you ask where Sid comes from? Or would such politeness kind of be beyond Dernikin?
Yeah, I think such politeness is a bit beyond Dernikin.
But you can like interpose it to keep the conversation going.
Oh yeah.
from this
Like
stalemate.
Dern will absolutely sort of talk about you. They're not just going to talk about themselves, but they're not going to ask questions. They don't get polite conversation back and
Too
forth.
old.
Yeah, no, if
Laura
no.
would ask where you're from, and just general polite conversation.
Let me check my notes.
Yes, I am from...
Yeah, I am
Thought
from.
you'd
This
get away
character
with
was
it,
made
no.
2 days ago. But yeah, if anyone asks, I would explain that I am from deep within the mountain, even deeper than most of these surface dwarves. Like gesturing to Dernikin as well as any of the other dwarves that are around us.
That is an interesting point. You said that your skin was grey.
Yes.
Are you just gonna go, why is your skin grey?
No,
I mean,
no,
that is literally
she's
what
definitely
Shikaya did.
thinking it. She's
Yeah.
definitely interested in that. But
She's looking. She's not making an awkward question yet, I assume.
no, just
A few drinks in,
Has-
maybe.
like, cause does anyone else have grey skin like him, or is he the only one?
No. So there's actually a noticeable difference between the dwarves in this chamber. Just like the elves. There are really 2 flavors of elves you see here. Hazelnut and barley. Yeah.
Say chocolate.
No, I'm not allowed to say chocolate anymore. But there's wood elves and high elves who look different to those who care, right? Just like there are hill dwarves and mountain dwarves who look different to those who care. Most mountain dwarves have a kind of reddish skin tone, especially ones from the Crimson Mountain, whereas the hill dwarves are much paler, like an ollie. And often blonde, and they have different dress as well. Like there's a cultural difference in the clothing.
And just to be clear, for those who don't know, Reikdom does make Dernikin very definitely.
He's a hill dwarf.
The grey hair means it's a bit less obvious, perhaps, but the skin is pale enough that you can tell.
Yeah. And there's always varieties, of course, among them. But like just looking around, you can usually, if you wanted to, tell where someone's from.
Yeah, like, so Vilnora takes notice, but doesn't say anything because she think it might be rude, but will ask questions to someone else later.
Excellent.
Speaking of, is Doruvian like a wood elf? Like obviously, or a high elf, or
wood elf
Doruvian,
to you?
Very, very wood elfy, but
no.
The hair
is a little darker, so they like to say that there might be some sun elf in their lineage, but nobody actually knows. So they just kind of drop it like, maybe.
As every elf is like, yes, 10 generations ago I was linked to the greatest king.
If she plays it like that, it's like, ooh, there's a little reply. But yeah, that would probably be Vilnora, just politely asking. And
Polite curiosities.
Very curious.
Cool. Well, let's draw our attention to the rest of the room, shall we? Because there's quite a few people in here. There are other people along the table also having polite conversation and eating. Among the elves, the ones that are not warriors are clearly diplomats. One with even a human bodyguard beside them. Large sword similarly leant up against a chair. That if you kind of didn't know any better, and honestly, you don't, you might mistake them for a half-elf or something, because they blend in so perfectly. They act like an elf so perfectly. The dwarves, there's a lot more merchant lords and things. The head of the table is nearly all dwarves. Whomever, the elven diplomats sent to kind of be on head of the table, there's like 2, where there are multiple dwarves there. The loudest is Lord Copperbeard. If you ever look at the map of Jarviskjir, there are kind of 3 major dwarven cities. The third is Copperbeard's Hold. He is the lord of it. He's the ginger laughing guy who was chatting with the halfling earlier. And he is sitting beside someone that... basically, Dernikin would probably recognize that this is Lord Copperbeard. Sidian, maybe not so. Maybe even Donna. Just because you have a lot of time to read and know people, and he would definitely be in engravings. Yeah, it's gossip, right? Because there is some gossip. There's some tasty gossip, and I'm going to give it to you for free. Beside him is the current dwarf lord of Crimson Mountain, appointed after the Dwarven Civil War, which is probably 6 or 8 years ago now. So recent memory. Wasn't particularly bloody. It was mostly political. Some death machines, don't worry about it. Who is Fearlock Copperbeard, Copperbeard's son. He is tall and thin. Being tall for a dwarf is not surprising and not unattractive. Being thin, unattractive. He also doesn't really have a beard. His kind of slightly darker skin than his father. He just the chin is bare. He has long sideburns that are kind of braided, but there's nothing here. And long hair, very glorious hair. Definitely some product in it. If you weren't a dwarf, he would be quite attractive, right? But from a dwarven perspective, he's, a little Like, what's up with that guy? He's weird, you know. And he's a little sheepish. He's a little small in the clothes he wears and the little, like, circlet crown thing that isn't as gaudy as, you know, maybe a human's crown. It's just like a ring of metal, right? But there is some gossip that everyone aside from maybe Vilnora would know. The mountain dwarves lost the civil war, and so the hill dwarves placed Fearlock to be the lord of Crimson Mountain. Dwarf lords are more or less a king. It's sort of different. It's kind of like an elected monarchy, but he is the son of Copperbeard, so Copperbeard has a lot more control, and Copperbeard allied with the hill dwarves. So it kind of created like a weird sense of control, especially because what he did as king was a lot more of a hill dwarf mentality. It's less mining so deep, you know, more environmentally friendly acts, that kind of thing. Not as traditional as the mountain dwarves are. And also, he's small. He reads a lot. He's like a singer. Like all these things that aren't individually weird, but altogether, he doesn't have the greatest public standing. His father goes up to the stage, mug in hand, as you might expect, slight stumbling up the stairs to an area where you're definitely meant to stand and speak.
Donoruvian is clutched by terror. Just like, oh no, public speaking.
Aye, all good friends. I won't interrupt the great drink soon. I hope you're enjoying everything. It's great, isn't it? And then someone's like, hey, you should probably say, like, oh no. We should have some formal celebrations, and it will go down in history, the words I say today. And there are dwarven lawkeepers in the room. There are people chiseling into stone what's being said. There are people drawing people in the room in charcoal. And so he does, like, motion, splashing ale out of the mug as he does. I would just like to say, as someone, you know, a lot of us in this room remember senseless battles, bloodshed for, no real reason. Sure, it was fun. Hey, sure, we all had our fun. But I'm happy to say that our sons and daughters and wives and all the people of all the lands can be safe from our new, not so new allies. And I, for one, think the Everhold should stay true for far longer. And there's like a sort of cheer and like a stomping of boots and maybe a very careful like elven clapping, you know, sort of thing. And, well, your host here today is my son, Fearlock, and there's a slightly less energetic cheer. Fearlock kind of looks up from not really listening. He's actually talking to a dwarven woman who is very clearly a commoner in a room of like nobles and merchants. But Fearlock is very much distracted by her and her short dress and her braided leg hair. Very in right now, in the summer especially. Like, and he's like, oh, Father, you don't need to discuss such, everyone knows we're in my city. Like, no, you deserve some respect as well. Everyone will remember what a good lord Fearlock Copperbeard was. And there's like a confused murmuring from the crowd. And Fearlock actually does kind of stand up at this point, which doesn't really change the height much at a dwarven table. Like, okay, Father. Thank you. My thanks, and my thanks to everyone. I'm just happy that everyone is here today. Peace means a lot to me. The word my father said that was core was senseless. We can fight the wars we need to fight for our protection, but we're stronger together. I think we all agree on that. And there's, I think, a probably more resounding cheer on that, because his way of speaking is a little more acceptable to elves. He's not up there drunk with a mug. while public speaking. And amongst the cheering and amongst the clapping, there is a definite pause. Some of you catch a dagger flying across the room from the shadows in the corner and plunging deep into Lord Copperbeard's heart up on the stage. And as he stumbles, this is a great time to take a little break. It's a classic!
Cliffhanger in the first hour of the session.
Boom!